Welcome to the Power in Motion podcast, the show for women who want to develop a kinder relationship with their body so you can feel healthy, happy, and confident without restricting food, doing torturous exercise, or constantly worrying about the number on the scale. I'm your host, Kim Hagel, size-inclusive fitness specialist and certified non-diet health and life coach specializing in body image. This podcast is here to provide weight-neutral, health at every size aligned information and coaching on sustainable habits and mindset shifts so you can feel your very best in the body you have right now. Let's lace up our runners and go for a walk while we chat. Hey there, and welcome back to part 4 of our 5-part series on how to eat normally. If you've been following along with this series, you'll know that we've been talking all about why we struggle so much with trying to eat, quote, healthy, even though we really want to. That was the theme of episode 53. And then in episode 54, I introduced you to the concept of intuitive eating and how it can help you shift from this place of restriction and out of control eating to feeling peaceful around food as you rebuild body trust. Last week on episode 55, we talked about some of the big fears and concerns people have when they're thinking about giving up dieting and eating intuitively, including the worry that they'll never stop eating or will only eat so-called bad foods, and also the fear of weight gain. Now, this is episode 56, and we've got a very special guest on the show. I always think it's helpful to hear from someone who's actually been there. So Stacey is a client of mine who's been practicing intuitive eating for a couple of years now. And in our interview, you'll hear how from the time she was in her early teens until her late 30s, she was either always on a diet or preparing for the next one. Stacey shares how she thought that restricting food worked because she'd always experienced short-term weight loss, but then would eventually feel deprived and would end up giving up and gaining the weight back, and she thought she had failed. But then in doing some reading, she realized that in fact, 95% of diets don't work long term. It wasn't actually her fault. And she knew in that moment that there was no end to this vicious cycle of restriction. It was not moving her closer to health, and it was only keeping her stuck in guilt and shame. So in this really honest and vulnerable interview, Stacey shares how she began the process of changing her relationship with food and how intuitive eating has transformed her life. Interestingly, when Stacey gave herself unconditional permission to eat, she felt less controlled by food and was able to move into a place of conscious, body respecting choices that help her feel and function her best. She'll take you through the process of how she figured that all out and what she learned about herself in the process. So I hope that you enjoy, and if you relate to what Stacey's talking about here, know that I've got your back. I've been working to create something really special to help those of you who are ready to get off the diet cycle and rebuild body trust through intuitive eating. My Find Food Freedom course is launching this weekend. So it's a self-directed course with learning modules, workbooks, and journaling prompts to help you learn how you can make that shift, both in your mindset and in your eating behavior, so that you can say no more to restriction and learn to trust your body to call the shots. Both Stacey and I and all the other women that I've worked with needed support to learn intuitive eating. So if you're in that boat yourself, this is for you. If you're listening to this in real time, you can find out more about the Find Food Freedom course via my social media this week or in my Facebook community, the Joyful Movement Show community, or if you get my emails, there will be info sent to you there as well. Now, if you're listening to this later down the road, then you can visit my website for more info. There is special pricing available for the course this weekend, which is Black Friday if you're listening in real time. But you can access this course anytime by visiting my website or the link in my Instagram bio. All right, so let's hear from Stacey. Hey, Stacey, welcome to the Joyful Movement Show. It's such a pleasure to have you here today.
Hi, Kim. Thanks for having me.
No problem. I always think it's so helpful to have clients on the show, real life people, so that my listeners can really hear how The concepts that I talk here on the show actually apply in real life. And you have been practicing intuitive eating for quite some time. You've really like embraced that lifestyle, and I'd say had a pretty amazing transformation as a result. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience with that and your journey along the way. I think it's going to be a really valuable conversation.
It's my pleasure.
Great. Okay, so before we get into how you brought intuitive eating into your life, let's go back in time a little bit. Take us back maybe a couple of years. What would you say was your biggest struggle around eating or your relationship to food back before we met?
I would say it was feelings of guilt,
Mm,
feeling like I should be eating healthier. I shouldn't be eating this. I should be eating that. And feeling like I just wasn't doing the right thing when it came to food and meals.
Where do you think that guilt stemmed from?
Well, I'd say social media, but I think it started even before that. There's just so much out there, TV, magazines, everything that's saying you should be eating healthy. You should want to cook great meals for you and your family.
Hmm.
But it's so hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard when you're trying to do what other people are telling you to do.
Yeah. What did you find the hardest? Like you would eat, quote, healthy. I always put healthy eating in air quotes because I don't like to label foods. But what did you find such a struggle with trying to do what you thought you should?
Well, I was always trying to lose weight.
Okay.
That's the only reason I was trying to eat healthy, as you
Uh,
say in air
uh,
quotes, um, because I thought I should be eating healthy so that I would lose weight and I would be more accepted.
okay. Okay. So then what would happen when you would try?
Well, I would lose weight for a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
then I would feel so restricted,
Mm,
so deprived that I would go back to eating anything and everything in sight and feel like, oh, now I've just wasted all that energy, all that hard work, and now I'm going to have to start over.
okay. So would you say you found yourself on that vicious cycle? I talk about this quite often on my social media channels and on the show that I don't even like to use the word diet cycle because nobody thinks that they're on a diet anymore these days. But that cycle of like wanting to eat better and then feeling that initial reward that comes when you maybe lose a few pounds or you get some validation for losing a bit of weight, but then the deprivation sinks in and you feel like you're missing out on some things. So a little bit of those old habits start to return, and before you know it, you've lost all control with food, and then comes the guilt and shame that you've blown it once again and have to start all over again.
That's exactly it. For the last 25 years, even, I'd say I was either on a diet or getting ready for the next diet.
Ah.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. So how would you describe your relationship to food when all that was going on? How did you feel about food?
Um, Scared of food in a
Oh,
way.
really? Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to enjoy food, and there certainly were foods I enjoyed, but then I always felt guilty for eating them. And I'll just say pizza, for
Okay.
example.
Okay.
It tasted so good, but then after I ate it, I thought, oh, I shouldn't have eaten that. That was a bad food. Why did you eat three slices when you should have only eaten two or one and had a salad with it? It was always that kind of mentality that it was good and bad foods.
And did you judge yourself as good and bad when you ate certain things?
Oh, certainly. Like, why didn't I have the willpower to stop at two slices of pizza or whatever it happened to be?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there was a fear around food. What were you afraid of?
Well, that I'd gain more weight.
Okay, and what would that mean about you?
Well, at the time, I thought that that would mean I wasn't good enough. I wasn't doing the right things to be the right person, to look the right way.
Mhm. And was there a belief that you had to be a certain weight to be, quote, healthy?
Well, sure. The
Yeah.
the old BMI chart. Like if you weren't in that range, you weren't healthy.
Right. Okay. So tell me how this all started to change. Was there one particular event or did it sort of evolve over time? Like, how did you begin to realize this just wasn't working for you anymore?
I don't even remember how I first heard about intuitive eating, but I did. And then I started reading about it. And I read about the extremely high percentage of diets that fail. And you
Yeah.
probably remember off the top of your head. It's
95, 95.
95, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought because I had dieted and lost weight in the past that those diets had worked.
Right. That is, can we pause for a second? Because that's such an important point to bring up. Like, I think that's a big thing that keeps us coming back and starting over again is we think, but it did work. It did work in the past.
Mhm.
I lost the weight. It did work. And
Oh,
we think it's
absolutely.
us. We think it's us who failed. Well, it's me who failed. I just stopped doing the things I was supposed to do and then I gained the weight back. But if I could only stick to it, it wouldn't fail.
Oh, exactly. Like how many different diets and calorie counting and using apps for this and that and tracking everything.
Mhm.
It just didn't work when I actually thought about it because if it
Yeah.
had worked, I would have continued to do it and it wouldn't have felt like a diet. I wouldn't have felt restricted or
Yes.
deprived. But I think that was the big turning point was just reading that sentence and thinking, "Oh, yeah, no, they actually didn't work. I might have had super short-term success or what I thought was success at the time, but
Mhm.
they actually didn't work."
No. And also, it wasn't your fault.
No. That's a really big one. That didn't sink in for a long, long time.
Oh, no?
No, that was a long and I mean, it's still you start to think, "Oh, but it had to have been me because I see so and so, and they've done that diet and they've lost 20 pounds, so it worked for them. Why doesn't it work for me?" And I think that's still something that I think for a second, and then I remember that's because diets don't work.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
me. They just don't work.
No, and what you're seeing when you compare yourself to others is a glimpse in time,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
They're gonna have the same result as you. I was trying to find a gentler way to say that, but 95% of the time, those people who you're seeing who are having so-called success with losing weight, they're not going to keep it off. Within 2 to 5 years, that weight is going to come back on. So, but we get pulled into this comparison trap that, well, they can do it. Why can't I? They really can't either.
No, and that's such a huge revelation when you get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
stop seeing the diet ads, and I mean, here we are, November. They're going to start coming up in another month or two, how to get
Mm-hmm.
a new you for the new year. But I think once you realize you don't need a new you, you're
Yeah.
just so much better off.
So true. It's so true. Yep. Okay, so you started to learn a little bit about intuitive eating. It sounds like for you it was the same as me. It sort of just landed in my lap. I'm not exactly sure when I first heard about it, but I sort of it did. Like I just heard about it and then I started digging into it and learning about it. There's a lot of initial reactions people have when they hear about intuitive eating and reasons why they think it can't possibly work or that won't work for me. What were your initial reactions? What concerns or misconceptions did you have at first about the idea of intuitive eating?
Well, as I said, for 25 years, I was always tracking or counting something. And I thought if I stopped, it would just be a free for all. I would
Mm-hmm.
eat anything and everything in sight,
Mm-hmm.
whether I thought it was good or bad. I would just eat like crazy
Right. Why do you think you worried about that?
because I just never eaten that way. Like,
Mm-hmm.
not since I was a teenager, even a very young teenager.
Mm-hmm.
I had been on a diet or thinking about a diet for so long, I just didn't think I could trust myself.
Yeah. And what would happen when you would give yourself a little bit of permission to eat?
well, when I was on a diet and I would eat whatever I wanted for an evening or even a weekend, well, then of course I would gain some weight because
Mhm.
my body just didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Oh,
And like you
changes.
said, you'd end up having the 3 pieces of pizza when you're only supposed to have 1 or whatever the case may
Mhm.
be, right? You had learned that if you gave yourself permission, you would eat all the things.
I would lose control. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So it would make sense that that would be your fear, that if you gave yourself permission to eat whatever you want, whenever you wanted, however much you wanted, that that's what you would do. A lot of people have that same fear. Were there any other fears that came up for you around intuitive eating, or what it might mean if you took it on?
Well, I think that was really the gist of it, that I would just eat everything and I wouldn't make what I thought were good choices. I would just eat all those bad foods.
Hmm.
You can't see my air quotes, but bad foods.
It's there.
I don't
Yeah.
think of them that way anymore, but I certainly used to.
Uh-huh. And so when you did embrace intuitive eating, is that what happened?
Not really, actually.
So what did
Um,
you find?
well, I found that when you give yourself permission to eat whatever you want, there isn't that rebellious,
Mm,
how do I word that? You know you can have whatever you want whenever you want, so you don't feel like you have to sneak it in before the next diet starts, or you have to
exactly.
save all your points for the weekend. It just totally changes your mindset. So
Hmm.
when I thought, oh, I can have pizza or chips or mac and cheese whenever I want, I didn't have as much desire to eat them as I thought I was going to.
Isn't that interesting?
Hmm.
And if you did have those foods, how would you engage with them?
I would eat as much of them as I felt I wanted and felt satisfied, and then I moved on.
And what about the guilt and shame?
It went out the window.
Interesting.
Hmm. Not overnight, of
Okay.
course, but yeah, like, why can't I eat what I want? I'm a grown adult. But the
Mhm.
other interesting thing that happened was really looking at how I feel after I eat the foods. So
Yes.
instead of thinking about them as good or bad, it was, if I eat that, am I going to enjoy it? And am I going to feel satisfied? Will I feel full? Will I feel good after eating that? And it
Mhm.
turns out that many of the things that I thought I craved, I don't feel so good after I eat them.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And when you start thinking about, how do I want to feel after I have that meal, kind of helps you determine what you want to eat.
for sure. Yeah, so
Hmm.
when food is available and you have permission to have whatever you want, and like you say, it's not this last supper where you have to get as much in as you can before the next diet starts, then suddenly it's a conscious choice. Like, I can have this food whenever I want. I can have as much of it as I want. It's always going to be available to me. But what's going to serve me best in this moment?
That's right. And it makes such a difference once you give yourself that permission to eat
Mhm.
however, whenever, whatever you want.
Mhm.
It totally changes your mindset around food.
Mhm. Mhm. So rather than feeling controlled by food and feeling guilty and ashamed about it, it sounds like you really just decided to take on an attitude of self-care. Like, how can I actually nourish myself, body, mind, and spirit? And what would be the best choice for me?
Hmm. And and also eating a meal and not thinking, well, I'm going to eat all of this because
Hmm.
it's been made, it's in front of me. I stop when I'm done. Like when I feel satisfied, I'm okay with pushing the plate away now.
Yeah. How do you think that's different than before?
Well, I know that I can have it again for lunch the next day if I want.
Exactly. Right?
Where before, if if I'd been having something that I didn't think I maybe should have been, it would have been okay. I'm just going to eat it now, get it over with, get it out of my system, and then tomorrow I'll be good. I'll just
Uh-huh.
get all the
Uh-huh.
bad foods out of the way today, and then tomorrow I'll be good.
Right.
But now it's like, well, if we have leftovers of that food, then I'll have that tomorrow if I so want to, and maybe I'll put it in the freezer. Like,
Hmm.
I just feel like there are so many more options
Mm.
when you take away the restrictions.
Hmm. I remember myself similarly, always, I would always clean my plate when I was restricting food, like, because I'd be so hungry by the next meal. And like all of my portions and eating times were prescribed, right? So, like, when I had the opportunity to eat, darn right, I was going to clear my plate because I wanted every calorie, every morsel to hold me over until I was allowed to eat again. Right. But now when I know I can eat whenever I want, I don't have to wait to a certain time. There's not that urgency to eat every or lick my plate clean because I can eat when I want.
Well, and that's it's not just about eating whatever you want, it's eating when you want. So
Yeah.
you don't have to eat breakfast at 7 a.m. You don't
Hmm.
have to have a small snack at 10 a.m. and lunch at noon. And that's how so many of the diets and programs that I used and tried to use, that's how they were prescribed. You
Hmm.
had to eat a certain number of meals and snacks every day.
Yep.
And so when you got the opportunity to eat, like you said, you ate it all because
Darn
that
right.
was what was earmarked for that snack. So you made sure you ate it, whether you were hungry or not. But you usually,
Absolutely. Usually you were, right?
yes.
Because you're in a restricted state. So of course you're going to be hungry. But yeah, that's, I think, what has been one of my biggest learnings is like that principle of feel your fullness. Like I never really
Mm,
felt full ever. So that took some practice to be able to like slow down and stop the meal when I was full, whether the plate was clean or not.
hmm.
Hmm.
That's a big thing too.
Yeah. Yeah. So, speaking of that, so we know there are 10 principles of intuitive eating, and most people don't take them all on all at once. It's a bit of a gradual progression and an unlearning of the things that you used to know and what you want now. What would you say were the first steps for you when you began intuitive eating?
Removing all those apps from my phone.
Oh, good one.
Taking away that the opportunity even to track things, because even when I thought of myself as not on a diet,
Hmm.
I was still using a couple of different, and I won't name them, but apps that, they would track how much water did I drink, all that stuff.
Uh-huh.
And I just deleted them. Like, away you
Okay.
go. I don't need to keep track of that. I'll know if I've drank enough water because I'll have gone to the bathroom enough times.
Right. And I won't
um,
feel thirsty.
that's right. And I probably won't get a headache in the middle of the afternoon.
There's that too.
Yes. So I just took away all of those temptations to track what I was doing, eating, drinking.
Mhm.
Um, and I stopped reading the labels because I used
Okay.
to, not the ingredients, I still think those are important, but I stopped looking at those nutritional facts that are on a box or a bottle or whatever it is, because I don't actually care anymore how many calories or
Mhm.
how many carbs, fat, that type of thing. So those were my biggest steps, was just to stop looking at that and stop tracking things.
Mhm. And what did you do instead? How did you begin to listen to your body to tell you what to eat?
I just decided, well, I'm not going to eat unless I'm hungry.
Okay.
That was another big step. And I had also done fasting before in the past,
Mhm.
and I found that I'm actually not hungry first thing in the morning. So,
Okay.
so forcing myself to eat what was a healthy breakfast when I was on a diet, I think, well, I didn't really need to do that because I'm not hungry first thing in the morning, and I'm still not. So I don't eat breakfast until I'm hungry. I have coffee first thing in the morning, but
Mhm.
I just don't eat until I'm ready to.
That's
Now,
interesting that you brought that up because I mean we are all different. I wake up in the morning and I got to eat as soon as my feet hit the floor. But it's interesting that the when you evolve into your intuitive eating journey and you figure out what works for you, it might look similar to a diet you've tried in the past, right? Like intermittent fasting, but it's on your terms.
that's right.
It's because it's what right for you and your body's telling you.
And I suppose maybe it's a little easier for me than it may be for some. I'm here by myself all day. So I don't have kids or a spouse or partner that, I'm trying to plan a meal around,
Mhm.
which I makes it a little trickier, gives another layer to it, but
Mhm.
it is interesting if you stop forcing yourself to eat at a certain time because of what the clock says, what you'll find you're actually hungry for.
Yeah.
It
Mhm.
doesn't have to be what you thought it was.
Right. Yeah, and breakfast doesn't have to look like breakfast.
It
Right.
doesn't. And because I mean, I don't eat breakfast in the morning. We quite often have what is considered breakfast for supper
Okay.
nights because that's when I feel like I want that much food.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's quite enjoyable at 5:30 at night.
I agree. I quite like breakfast for dinner. It's one of my favorite things. Okay, so you started by deleting the apps, deleting the tracking, and just tuning into your own hunger, fullness, and satisfaction signals. We haven't really talked about satisfaction, but what did you notice about your feelings about food when you gave yourself permission to eat?
I noticed that I feel the most satisfied when my plate has color on it.
Oh,
There's variety in
yeah.
my meals. Um, and when I mean, we talk about balanced plates in dieting, but I
Mhm.
think that also applies to just feeling good too. Like
Okay.
I feel good when I have some protein and some carbs and some vegetables
Hmm.
in a meal. That just is satisfying to me. I feel good eating it and I feel good after.
Perfect. And that's the most important thing is really tuning in to how you feel and do you feel satisfied? Like does it hold me over to the next meal? Am I left like craving anything or is there something missing on my plate? Do like am I wishing for some sweetness after the meal? And you can totally have that, right? But it's tuning into what does your balanced plate look like? And I love how you talked about color because our senses are so important when we're eating, and how our plate looks visually does make a big difference into how we experience that meal. And I know you're a visual person and you like things to look nice.
Well, I do. And we are meal planners, so we know what's coming for supper each night. We do plan that out. But my husband will say, "Well, what does it matter what the color is?" Like it matters. It just does. Trust me. And I mean, he would eat anything that's put on the plate, but I just like to see some variety and some color on my plate. It makes me feel good making it. It makes me
Yeah.
feel good plating it, eating it, and
Mhm.
afterwards. It's just the intuitive eating has just brought so much joy back to
Mm.
meals instead of them being like a what do
Drudgery.
I say? Yeah, it's brought joy back to meals
Mhm.
again.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. And in fact, a lot of clients, when they're first starting with intuitive eating, and I felt this myself, like they don't want to cook or they just don't have a lot of excitement about food. And I think it's because for so many years we were told what we had to have and when, and like cooking was done with the intention of getting your fuel ready. There was nothing about enjoyment in the process that wasn't even encouraged or talked about when we were on a plan, right?
Well, I think that's just it. You maybe lost some of the joy in cooking meals because you thought you had to. Oh,
Hmm.
I have to cook this meal because that what was on the plan this week and I don't want to eat it and I'm not going to feel satisfied, but I have to.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that really does just take the joy and excitement right out of it.
Yeah, and I think over time our creativity just dies. So it can take some time for that spark for food and for cooking to come back. But like you say, just thinking about colors, that's helpful right there, right? Like
Mhm.
how can I make my plate look pretty? And then from there it sparks some creativity and joy for cooking. Were there any other big mindset blocks that came up for you that you became aware of as you embraced intuitive eating?
Well, I would kind of go back to when I was reading about 95% of diets failing and I had this realization that I do not want to diet for the rest of my life. I
Mm-hmm.
do not want this to be forever. Like, at what point was I going to say, okay, I've lost the weight I wanted to lose. Now I'm done. Now I just move forward.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I was ever going to get to that point. and it's too exhausting. It's
What?
it's just too much to be restricted all the time, to always be trying to figure out the points and the calories, and
Mhm.
it's just not fun.
I think
It's
that's such an important thing you bring up too, because I think we can fall into a trap of thinking like once I arrive,
yes.
everything's going to be easier then. I'll have lost the weight. I'll know how I'm supposed to eat. I'm going to feel great about myself. And it's going to be a no brainer going forward. But that's not how it goes.
But I don't think anybody ever gets there
Well, this is it.
because it's too much. You've just restricted yourself and deprived yourself to the point that you can't live like that forever.
Yeah. And that's
So,
what it would take. Like, that is what you are setting yourself up for life.
and who wants to live like that?
Certainly not me.
No, food is way too good, way too enjoyable to not have a good relationship with it.
Mm-hmm. So, talk to me about health. I know at the beginning of this interview, we talked about your fears about like needing to lose weight to be healthy. What are your thoughts around that now?
Health, I mean, I am not a health expert by any means, certainly not a doctor, but it can't just be all about the BMI,
Mm-hmm,
or the
mm-hmm,
whatever chart somebody's looking at. Health is so many other things, and it's not just our body, it's also our mind and our
mm-hmm,
spirit. Like, it's there's so much more to it than the number on the scale.
mm-hmm.
And now that I think about that, that was one of the other steps, removing all those apps from my phone. But I stopped stepping on the scale.
Good. Mm-hmm,
Huge thing.
mm-hmm.
I didn't throw it out because it's really pretty and it was expensive, but it is tucked in a closet, and I don't step on it because there's no need to. There's nothing it can tell me that I don't know
Right.
about myself. Like, it has nothing to do with me as a person. It's
Mm-hmm.
just a number.
Yeah, yeah. And as you say, you were measuring your health, measuring your success using that piece of equipment. So how do you how do you measure your health and success now? And like you say, health means so many, it's such a broad term and there's so much more to it than just our physical. But how do you know that you're on the path to health for you?
Well, I know that mentally I am in a much better state, with my relationship with food. I don't consume my thoughts with it, trying to think about what's
Mm,
the meal going to be. And it, it also plays into movement. Like, I stopped tracking how many steps I'd taken each
mm,
day, and like,
mhm,
because that just doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it's how we feel.
mhm, mhm,
And I feel so much better. I feel so free
mhm.
not being on a diet.
Yeah, 100%. Would you say that's your biggest win since embracing intuitive eating, or is there something else?
I think the freedom and trusting myself, trusting my
Mm,
to tell me what I need.
yeah.
Mhm.
And I think the two go hand in hand. Like there is so much freedom in being able to trust your body and your intuition to guide you as opposed to trusting a set of rules or an app or something else to tell you whether you're getting it right and always feeling like you're getting it wrong.
Yes, I had a friend say, just the other day, "I wish I could eat whatever I want." And I said, "But you can." Like, what? Unless you truly have a health reason or
An
some kind
allergy or something,
to
right?
food, you can actually eat whatever you want. And I think it was eye-opening to her,
Mm-hmm.
because like me, she has been dieting for years, always thinking about, if I could just lose those last 15 pounds, then
Mm-hmm.
dot dot dot.
Yeah.
But why can't you have dot 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 now? What does it have to do with 15 pounds?
Such an important statement, right? Like we literally put our lives on hold until we get to a certain place. Like we think that we have to look a certain way before we can have the things we want to have in life. So that was a question I wanted to ask you is what's become available to you or what are you using your mental energy for now? How are you living that now life that you thought was a down the line thing when you lost the weight in the past?
Well, I just don't wait for things. If I want to go for something now, I go for it. And like I said, we still meal plan. So I do that because I like to feel organized. I'm not
Mhm.
doing that because I need to know how many calories are in supper so that I
Yeah,
can plan my breakfast and lunch. It's just so that we know what to thaw out the night before.
sure.
Um, but I plan our meals around what we enjoy, what's going to make us feel satisfied, what we have time for that night. I don't plan them around what's good and bad, what the
Mhm.
calorie and point count is. And I think I stopped waiting for the when I lose to
Yes.
happen because I don't need to lose any weight for the things I wanted to have happen in my life.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it wasn't going my life wasn't going to change even if I did lose weight.
Yeah,
I
it won't automatically, right? Like you've
no.
learned that it doesn't matter what you do or what results you get. You don't feel differently until you decide to think differently.
That's right.
Right?
Our thoughts are very powerful.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mhm.
And as
That we could
long
podcast on that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we could. And maybe we will. I'm always talking about the power of our thoughts, but as long as all of our thoughts are about food and obsessing over food and is it right, is it wrong, am I following the rules, am I doing it, am I being good, am I bad, when we're spending all of our time thinking about food and following rules and doing it right or doing it wrong or how our life is going to be different once we finally get to the weight we want to be, we can't think about the things in life that really matter, right? So tell me, maybe this is a tough question for on the spot, Stacey, but what do you think you really had to change in your thoughts so that you could have your future life today?
Hmm. Yep, that's a tough on the spot question. I think the biggest thing for me was feeling like I was good enough the way I am.
Yeah.
That there wasn't a need to change my appearance to make me a better person. I'm already a good person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think the probably the biggest thing was changing the thought that I wasn't doing enough or I wasn't doing it right or it wasn't good enough.
Or that you weren't doing
Right.
it right or you weren't good enough as you were.
Yes.
Mhm.
I think that's probably one of the biggest things is yes, give yourself permission to eat whatever you want whenever you want, but you are enough.
Mhm.
We all are enough the way we are.
Yeah. 100%. It all starts with a thought. And like you say, giving yourself permission to eat is one thing, but knowing that you deserve it and knowing that you're enough exactly as you are, that's where it all starts.
Mhm.
Yeah. So glad we came full circle and that came up. That's such an important realization in this whole process. The thought work is huge because that's what takes this from being just another plan or another set of though they're not rules, they are principles. The thought work is what takes it from being another thing that you follow to really being able to integrate it into your life.
Yes, it's not just going to be a 6-month plan of, "Oh, I'm just gonna eat whatever I want, do what I want for 6 months, and then see what happens." It's not a plan. It's
Mhm.
and I mean, you hear this all the time, "Oh, it's a lifestyle change."
Mhm.
But it truly is. You
Yeah,
are changing the way you think about
yeah.
things.
Yeah, I mean, it is and it isn't a lifestyle, but it's really returning to how you were meant to eat before all of the rules and stuff got in the way.
Yes, and that was one of the things I really thought about too was what did I love to eat? What did I truly
Mm,
enjoy
mm,
before I put the word bad next to that food.
Right.
And it was interesting that some of those things I thought I really, really wanted and I craved and I'd been deprived of, when I had them, they weren't as good as I remembered them being.
Yeah, it's just that emotional attachment to it and the
Mhm.
feeling that anything that we label as bad, of course, our rebellious side is going to want to have it and crave it that much more, and it's going to seem that much more
Absolutely.
attractive. Yeah, amazing. Is there anything else you think would be helpful to touch on or that our listeners would really resonate with?
Of course, I think people are going to be apprehensive, especially if they've been dieting forever. And I get it. I was too. It scared me, but oh, it was so worth it.
Mm,
And I'm
mhm,
still learning. I mean, I first read about intuitive eating probably getting on 2 years ago
mhm,
now.
mhm,
And I'm still learning what I enjoy, what makes me happy and satisfied. But it's just been so worth it to have the freedom and to take that scariness, the all that planning, all that worrying about food away and to
mhm.
just go back to enjoying food like we did when we were kids and we didn't think about it.
Yeah, 100%. Good, good. Well, Stacey, thanks so much once again for coming and sharing your insights here on the show today. I know this will really resonate well with the people who are listening and hopefully clear up a lot of misconceptions that they have and give them the courage to, like you say, try it out.
Yes, I certainly hope so. I mean,
Mhm.
I've never looked back. I've been so happy that I learned about intuitive eating.
Yeah, it's kind of like once you take it on, you can't look back really. Once you experience that freedom and how peaceful it can be around food, why would you want to go back?
I don't. And I don't think anybody else will. I think once you learn to trust yourself, you'll find such freedom that you won't go back. You won't look back.
Mm-hmm. 100%. All right. Well, thanks so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate you being here on the show, Stacey.
My pleasure. Thank you, Kim.
Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. Stacey's got a real way of telling things as they are, and I really appreciate her willingness to be on the show, and I hope her words have inspired you. Next week, we'll be wrapping up this series on how to eat normally with some tips and tricks about how to navigate the holidays using intuitive eating so you can avoid the whole new year, new you shame trap and approach 2022 with the mindset that maybe this will be the year that you declare no more diets. In the meantime, you can stay connected on my social channels at Radiant Vitality Wellness or come join us inside my free Facebook group, the Joyful Movement Show Community. That's where you can hear more about the Find Food Freedom course. So go check that out if you're ready to give up restriction and eat normally without fear. If you loved this episode, please share it and tag us so we can thank you or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Reviews and shares are the love language of podcasting and really help move the show up the rankings so other women can hear these messages. So those are greatly appreciated. All right, we will see you back here next Monday for more non diet motivation. In the meantime, be well, and here's to your radiant vitality. Thanks for tuning into the Power in Motion podcast today. If you love what you're learning here, then I invite you to take the next step of embodying these concepts into your own life so that you can live your healthiest, happiest life and never again feel held back by your body. Coaching is the fastest, most efficient pathway to taking what you know in your head to actually applying it and seeing results. Whether you're looking to make changes around movement, food, body image, or all three, I'm here to help you nurture a kind, respectful, and trusting relationship with your body so you can feel your very best. Click the link in the show notes to book a free consultation, and together we'll uncover what's getting in the way of you having the results you want. You'll leave this call knowing exactly what you need to work on, and together we'll explore whether one of my coaching offers is a good fit for you. I can't wait to meet you.